Picture the sprawling, cluttered mansion on the hill, where the patriarch of television's most famous polygamous family sits in his throne of self-delusion, completely oblivious to the legal guillotine positioned directly over his bank accounts. Kody Brown has spent over a decade demanding absolute loyalty, weeping on national television about being robbed of fatherhood, and throwing massive, vein-popping tantrums to secure 50-50 custody of his daughter Truly, simply to maintain the illusion of the ultimate family man. But underneath the fake tears and the patriarchal rage lies a staggering multi-million-dollar secret that is about to blow his and Robyn's financial empire to absolute ash. In a twist of fate so ironic it feels scripted by karma itself, the man who claims dominion over 18 children committed one arrogant, fatal mistake 14 years ago. He never signed Truly's birth certificate. Before we dive into the leaked court documents and the trap Kody never saw coming, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to Jenny Exposes so you never miss a single dark truth we uncover. Now let the reality of that blank line on a government document sink in. For 14 years, Kody Brown paraded himself in front of TLC cameras as the supreme leader of a sprawling plural empire, demanding respect and submission from his wives, while taking endless credit for the creation of his massive family. He stood in hospital rooms, smiled for magazine covers, and built an entire reality television brand off the concept that his seed and his leadership were the foundation of the Brown family universe. Yet when the cameras stopped rolling and the time came to put a pen to paper and legally claim the child he supposedly loved so fiercely, he vanished into the shadows like a ghost. This was not a clerical error. This was not a momentary lapse of memory in the chaotic aftermath of a hospital delivery. This was a calculated move of self-preservation that is now metamorphosed into a ticking time bomb, legally weaponized by the very woman he spent years emotionally tormenting. Christine Brown, the woman who was dismissed as the ungrateful basement wife, the woman who was told her sacrifices were never enough, has officially stopped playing by the rules of Kody's imaginary patriarchy and has entered the ruthless arena of the United States legal system. Christine has officially filed a lawsuit demanding full custody, the establishment of paternity, and a staggering 14 years of retroactive child support, effectively dragging Kody out of his comfortable reality television narrative and throwing him to the mercy of a family court judge. This is the ultimate trap, and Kody walked into it with his eyes wide open, blinded by his own towering hubris. For years, he controlled the narrative by manipulating the emotional landscape of his family, threatening to withhold love and resources if his wives dared to step out of line. He thought he held all the cards because he controlled the spiritual covenants and the television contracts. But the American legal system does not care about spiritual ceilings. It does not care about religious persecution complexes, and it absolutely does not care about who is the favorite wife. The law operates on paper, and on paper, Kody Brown is a complete stranger to his youngest daughter with Christine. By intentionally keeping his name off that vital record, he inadvertently stripped himself of all legal rights to demand anything regarding Truly's upbringing, location, or custody, handing Christine an impenetrable shield of legal autonomy that she is now using to systematically dismantle his financial security. The credibility dilemma Kody faces right now is nothing short of brutal, forcing him into a suffocating double bind from which there is zero escape. When he inevitably stands before a judge, stripped of his reality TV producers and his carefully curated lighting, he will be forced to answer a single, devastating question. Why is your name not on your 14-year-old daughter's birth certificate? To answer this, Kody must choose his own poison. He can either admit that he intentionally falsified government documents to dodge polygamy laws, exposing himself to intense legal scrutiny and potentially massive fraud implications, or he can admit that he was simply too neglectful, too lazy, and too detached to bother filling out the paperwork for his own flesh and blood. Either answer destroys him. If he claims he was hiding from the law, he looks like a coward who prioritized his own freedom over his daughter's legal protection. If he claims it was a mistake, he confirms everything Christine has been saying about his blatant absenteeism and chronic neglect. He is trapped in a maze of his own deceit, cornered by a paper trail that consists entirely of his own absence. This is no longer just a battle of bruised egos or wounded pride, where Kody can pout on a confessional couch and wait for a producer to throw him a sympathetic edit. This is about cold, hard, unyielding cash, and the sheer volume of money on the line threatens to entirely bankrupt the hoarder's paradise he has built with Robyn. Over the past few years, viewers have watched in growing disgust as Kody and Robyn funneled family resources into their sprawling Flagstaff mansion, filling it with expensive art, gaudy jewelry, and towering piles of consumer goods, while the other wives were left to scrape together their own survival. They have built a kingdom on the backs of the women Kody discarded, resting on a fragile foundation of TLC checks and inequitable financial distribution. But retroactive child support for 14 years is not a minor inconvenience. It is a catastrophic financial reckoning. We are talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, legally mandated to be paid back for every single month he enjoyed the title of father without footing the bill. A family court judge will look at the massive disparity between Kody's heavily documented income, his luxurious lifestyle with his legal wife, and the complete lack of financial support he provided to Christine as she raised Truly single-handedly. The courts do not kindly look upon wealthy men who hide behind spiritual marriages to avoid statutory financial obligations. If the hammer falls and Christine is awarded the maximum retroactive amount, the Coyote Pass dream is dead. The mansion could be heavily leveraged or lost, and Kody's financial empire will be bled dry to pay the debts he has been dodging since 2010. Leaked court documents have begun circulating, sending shockwaves through the fan base and the media, painting a sickeningly clear picture of a man whose actions are completely divorced from his words. The stark, undeniable reality of that blank space on the birth certificate stands in glaring, horrific contrast to the resurfaced clips of Kody throwing theatrical tantrums during Sister Wives episodes. We have all seen the footage. We watched him scream at Christine, his face contorted in rage, demanding equal time. We watched him wipe away non-existent tears, claiming he was being robbed of the experience of fatherhood, manipulating the audience to believe that Christine was a villainous kidnapper, tearing a loving father away from his child. He weaponized the language of parental alienation, trying to whip up public sympathy and paint himself as the aggrieved, tragic hero of a broken family. Yet, those leaked documents reveal the terrifying depths of his inauthenticity. He was screaming for 50-50 custody of a child he had not even bothered to legally claim. He wanted the absolute power to dictate where Truly lived, who she spent time with, and how she was raised, without ever doing the bare minimum requirement of putting his name on the line to say, "I am responsible for this human being." It is the ultimate manifestation of his core behavioral flaw. Kody's arrogant, insatiable need for total patriarchal control entirely blinds him to his absolute negligence of actual, legal parental responsibility. He wants the royal title, the crown, and the absolute submission of his subjects, but he refuses to do a single ounce of the grueling, unglamorous work required to actually govern. This staggering contradiction shatters the very foundation of his identity. He demands respect simply because he exists, expecting the world to bow to his biological contributions, while he actively dodges the legal, financial, and emotional weight of fatherhood. When Christine made the agonizing decision to pack her life into boxes and move Truly to Utah, Kody saw an opportunity to play the supreme victim for the cameras. He lashed out with vicious, calculated cruelty, accusing Christine of stealing his daughter, of destroying the family culture, of committing an act of unforgivable betrayal. He ranted to anyone who would listen, trying to poison the well against the woman who was actually doing the parenting. But the emotional appeal failed miserably, collapsing under the weight of his own observable actions. Audiences saw right through the performance because the truth was glaringly obvious. Kody refused to drive a few hours to visit Truly. He cited arbitrary COVID rules long after the world had moved on. He blamed his schedule, he blamed the other wives, he blamed the alignment of the stars. Anything to excuse the fact that he simply did not want to leave the comfortable, compliant bubble he had built with Robyn. He wanted Christine to stay in Flagstaff, miserable and isolated, simply so he could occasionally drop by to maintain the optical illusion of fatherhood. By moving to Utah, Christine didn't just take Truly away. She took away Kody's stage, his props, and his ability to control the lighting of his own life story. The thematic hypocrisy of this entire scandal is staggering, serving as the ultimate fatal blow to the legacy Kody Brown has spent his adult life trying to build. This is a man whose entire public persona, his entire religious ideology, and his entire source of wealth are built upon the premise that he is the supreme anointed leader of a massive tribe. He expects his wives to view him as their literal savior, their ticket to the highest tiers of heaven, and he expects his children to view him as an infallible patriarch whose word is absolute law. Yet, stripped of the religious jargon and the reality television editing, the core moral of this story is pathetically mundane. A man claiming to be the supreme leader of 18 children is not even legally recognized as the father of his youngest child with his ex-wife. He is a ghost in the legal system, a man who talks endlessly about his legacy while failing to secure the very paperwork that proves his bloodline. This is not the behavior of a patriarch. This is the behavior of a deadbeat dad hiding behind the complex, confusing veil of plural marriage. He used the structure of polygamy not to build a strong, cohesive family, but to insulate himself from accountability, creating a labyrinth of spiritual wives and undocumented children that allowed him to pick and choose when and where he wanted to be a father. Now, as the legal machinery grinds to life and the court dates loom ominously on the calendar, the isolation surrounding Kody has become deafening. The massive, chaotic family gatherings are gone. The adoration of multiple wives fighting for his attention has evaporated. The older children, who once looked at him with reverence, have grown up, seen the reality of his neglect, and walked away, choosing the mothers who actually raised them over the father who merely demanded their obedience. Kody is left entirely alone in his mountaintop mansion with Robyn, surrounded by expensive clutter and the deafening echoes of his own bad decisions. He is locked in a legal battle he absolutely cannot win, facing a judge who will demand documents, bank statements, and legal proof, none of which Kody possesses. He can no longer charm his way out of this, he can no longer yell until the other side submits, and he can no longer threaten to withhold his presence, because Christine has already proven that her life and Truly's life are infinitely better without him in it. While Kody paces the hardwood floors of his Flagstaff compound, hemorrhaging money on legal fees and desperately trying to spin a narrative that the world stopped believing years ago, Truly is thriving happily in Utah. She is surrounded by a massive, supportive extended family, living a quiet, joyful life completely untouched by the toxic chaos and the emotional manipulation of the Coyote Pass empire. Christine's decision to leave wasn't just an escape. It was a surgical extraction, removing her child from a toxic environment and placing her in a space where she is celebrated, not tolerated. The contrast is devastating. Kody is fighting a desperate, losing battle to retain a scrap of legal control over a child who has already emotionally moved on, while the mother he discarded holds all the power, all the legal high ground, and all the public support. The point of no return is rapidly approaching, arriving in the form of a heavily anticipated court mediation date that will seal Kody Brown's fate permanently. This is the moment the entire house of cards comes crashing down. Once they enter that mediation room, the spiritual rules are suspended, and the harsh, unforgiving light of family law takes over. The mediator will look at the blank birth certificate, the 14 years of zero formal child support, the massive disparity in living conditions between Kody's mansion and Christine's previous struggles, and the indisputable fact that Kody has actively chosen not to be a daily presence in Truly's life. When the judge ultimately rules, the financial lockdown will be absolute. Kody will be ordered to pay, his assets will be scrutinized, and his cash flow will be redirected to the woman he thought he had defeated. More importantly, his carefully constructed, aggrieved father narrative will be destroyed forever, replaced by the permanent legal label of a neglectful parent who had to be sued to take responsibility for his own daughter. The trap has snapped shut, the million-dollar scandal has been laid bare, and the supreme patriarch is about to lose his crown, his fortune, and his legacy, all because he thought he was too smart to sign a simple piece of paper. Step inside the suffocating walls of the Flagstaff mansion, where the air is thick with the scent of expensive dust and mounting paranoia. This is no longer the castle of a triumphant reality television king. It has become a gilded bunker, a fortress under imminent legal siege. Mountains of unopened delivery boxes, gaudy statues, and excessive hoarded luxury goods stand as silent, mocking monuments to a financial empire that is currently bleeding out from a wound Kody Brown inflicted upon himself 14 years ago. The frantic pacing across the dark hardwood floors echoes the terrifying realization that the game of emotional roulette he played for over a decade has finally ended in a catastrophic loss. Kody and his legal wife Robyn have spent years insulating themselves behind heavy mahogany doors, convincing each other that they were the victims of a grand familial conspiracy, that the other wives were simply too jealous, too unyielding, and too bitter to understand his magnificent vision. But the delusion is shattering under the blinding, clinical lights of forensic accounting. Robyn, who maneuvered for years to secure the coveted title of the sole, legally recognized spouse, is suddenly waking up to the horrifying reality of what that legal marriage actually entails. By tying her financial fate legally and exclusively to Kody, she has bolted herself to the deck of a sinking ship. The protection she sought has become the very chain dragging her down, because the family court system does not view their hoarded wealth as sacred. It views it as a pool of extremely liquid assets, ripe for the garnishing to satisfy a 14-year debt to a forgotten daughter. The anatomy of this legal trap is terrifying in its precision, a masterclass in turning a narcissist's own hubris against him. For years, Kody operated under a dangerous, sovereign citizen-style delusion that he could outsmart the government, outmaneuver the family courts, and dictate his own laws based on his patriarchal authority. He constructed a dizzying labyrinth of LLCs, shuffling TLC television payouts from one holding company to another, dissolving old family accounts, and funneling the lion's share of the reality television fortune directly into Dabsark, the corporate entity solely controlled by him and Robyn. He believed this financial shell game made him untouchable. He believed that because Christine was merely a spiritual wife, she had no legal standing to touch the empire he was building in the Arizona pines. But retroactive child support is the ultimate equalizer, a ruthless legal mechanism designed specifically to pulverize the financial hiding places of deadbeat parents. Christine's legal team is not going to politely ask for a monthly stipend moving forward. They are initiating a devastating financial autopsy. They will subpoena the bank records, the land deeds for Coyote Pass, the tax returns, and the hidden corporate accounts. Every single dollar Kody spent on Robyn's luxury vehicles, every extravagant piece of art purchased for the mansion, and every dime hoarded while Truly was left to rely on her mother's singular income will be dragged into the unforgiving light of a courtroom. The judge will look at the massive, undeniable disparity between the patriarch living in multi-million-dollar opulence and the spiritual wife who had to hustle online multi-level marketing products just to ensure her daughter's medical bills were paid. The court does not care about spiritual divorces or who disrespected whom on a reality television couch. The court only sees a wealthy man who systematically evaded his statutory obligation to provide for his biological offspring, and the financial penalties for such evasion are completely ruinous. To fully understand the staggering irony of this collapse, we have to rewind the clock to the very moment this trap was unknowingly set. Transport yourself back to the sterile, chaotic hospital room in 2010. The cameras were rolling, capturing the birth of Truly Brown for the inaugural season of a television show that promised to normalize polygamy. Kody was bouncing off the walls, radiating manic energy, soaking up the camera time, and portraying himself as the fiercely devoted father of a rapidly expanding brood. Yet, behind the scenes, a darker, deeply paranoid narrative was playing out. The Brown family was terrified of the state of Utah, petrified that their public exposure would lead to massive criminal investigations and the arrests of the polygamist adults. Driven by this absolute, blinding terror of state intervention, Kody made the calculated, cowardly decision to leave his name completely off Truly's birth certificate. He believed he was outsmarting the system, erasing his legal footprint to protect his own freedom while throwing Christine into the vulnerable position of being a legally single mother on paper. He thought he was playing 3D chess against the government, but he was actually handing Christine the ultimate weapon of his own destruction. By erasing himself from that government document, he legally classified himself as a mere sperm donor, a total stranger with absolutely zero custodial rights. He traded his legal fatherhood for a paranoid sense of security, never once stopping to consider that the very legal system he was hiding from would one day be weaponized by the woman holding the blank document. This behavioral flaw is the rotting core of Kody Brown's entire existence. He demands absolute, unquestioning submission from his wives and children, yet he utterly refuses to bind himself to the legal, moral, and financial responsibilities that such leadership requires. He wants the glory of the crown without the heavy burden of ruling. Watch the resurfaced footage of Kody sitting on the porch of Christine's house, his eyes cold and dead, trying to gaslight and terrify her into signing a bogus, legally meaningless contract to secure 50-50 custody before she fled to Utah. He sat there, practically foaming at the mouth, telling her that the state would come and take Truly away if they didn't have a signed agreement between them. He was using the very fear of the government that dictated his actions in 2010 to try and bully her into compliance in 2022. But Christine, who had finally awakened from the fog of his emotional abuse, simply stared at him with cold, terrifying clarity. She knew what he was trying to do. She knew that he was absolutely terrified of stepping foot inside a real courthouse, because a real judge would demand to see the paperwork Kody never signed. She called his bluff, packed her bags, and drove across the state line, taking his daughter and his dignity with her. Kody's reaction wasn't the sorrow of a heartbroken father. It was the explosive, unhinged rage of a control freak who realizes his victim has found the keys to the cage. The psychological collapse happening inside Kody's mind right now must be nothing short of agonizing. Narcissistic injury of this magnitude is a fatal wound to a man whose entire ego is constructed on the delusion of his own superiority. Every time he logs onto the internet, every time he looks at a magazine cover, he sees Christine radiating joy, living her absolute best life with a new, devoted husband, entirely unfazed by the storm she left behind in Flagstaff. He sees Truly smiling, thriving, and surrounded by a sprawling support system that doesn't require her to beg for a scrap of paternal affection. The contrast is a daily psychological torment for Kody. He has spent years spinning a narrative that he was the victim, that Christine was a toxic, poisoned well who destroyed the family culture. But the public jury has returned its verdict, and he has been found entirely guilty. The audience sees him for exactly what he is, a bitter, aging man who abandoned his children for a favorite wife and is now crying foul because the bill has finally arrived. He cannot charm his way out of a legal summons. He cannot throw a temper tantrum at a family court judge and expect them to apologize and coddle his feelings. The legal system is a cold, indifferent machine that operates on evidence, dates, and dollars, and Kody has absolutely zero evidence to support his claims of being a dedicated father. As the financial pressure cooker reaches its absolute boiling point, the dynamic between Kody and Robyn is undoubtedly fracturing under the weight of the impending ruin. Robyn entered this family with massive debts, tears, and a demand for legal protection, systematically positioning herself as the sole beneficiary of Kody's wealth and affection. She played the long game, shedding crocodile tears while quietly securing the legal marriage certificate and the multi-million-dollar property deeds. But now, the very legal framework she manipulated to secure her empire is the framework that will be used to dismantle it. Retroactive child support is a priority debt. It bypasses the LLCs, it slices through the joint bank accounts, and it places an inescapable lien on their financial future. Robyn's pristine, hoarded mansion is sitting directly on the fault line of a massive legal earthquake. The irony is poetic and absolute. The woman who demanded Kody legally adopt her children from a previous marriage is now going to watch her joint fortune be completely decimated to pay for the biological child Kody legally abandoned. The tears she cries now will not be for the cameras, and they will not be for the destruction of the plural family culture. They will be the very real, very desperate tears of a woman watching her bank accounts freeze and her luxurious lifestyle evaporate into the thin, cold air of the Arizona mountains. The trap is set, the documents are filed, and the countdown to total financial annihilation has begun. Kody Brown is trapped in a prison entirely of his own making, locked inside a mansion with the favorite wife he destroyed his entire family to keep, waiting for the gavel to fall. He thought he was the ultimate puppet master, pulling the emotional strings of 4 different women, dictating the terms of their survival, and keeping the profits for himself. But he forgot the golden rule of surviving the real world. You can manipulate a reality television edit. You can manipulate a spiritual wife. But you cannot manipulate the terrifying, unyielding power of the United States legal system when it comes to collecting what is owed to a child. The hands on the clock are spinning mercilessly toward the ultimate point of no return, ticking down to a court-mandated mediation date that will serve as the final execution block for Kody Brown's manufactured reality. Imagine the suffocating tension as Kody is forced to step out of his heavily curated reality television echo chamber and into the cold, sterile, unforgiving machinery of the family court system. There will be no friendly producers to feed him lines, no sympathetic lighting to soften his scowl, and no compliant host sitting across from him on a tell-all couch, allowing him to endlessly deflect, gaslight, and redirect the blame onto the wives he discarded. In the eyes of the law, Kody's sprawling monologues about respect, patriarchal hierarchy, and spiritual betrayal are absolutely worthless. A court mediator does not care about the esoteric rules of his religious covenants, nor do they care about his perceived grievances as a neglected husband. They care about dates, signatures, and verifiable financial contributions. When Kody is forced to sit across a mahogany table from the woman he spent years diminishing, he will finally realize that his voice, the loudest and most demanding instrument in his entire arsenal, has been completely stripped of its power. He will be staring down the barrel of a legal loaded gun, held by Christine, the basement wife who quietly gathered her strength, documented his absence, and meticulously built a bulletproof case while he was busy admiring his own reflection. In this impending legal showdown, Kody's foundational hypocrisy will be laid out on the table like forensic evidence at a crime scene. He spent a decade preaching the absolute necessity of family loyalty, demanding that his wives and children bow to his authority, explicitly stating that love was conditional upon their unquestioning respect for his position as the head of the household. Yet, when the state of Utah demands proof of his own loyalty, proof that he took the absolute most basic, fundamental step of legally claiming his daughter, he will have nothing to offer but empty air and a blank piece of paper. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of a man who believed he could govern an entire tribe of humans without participating in the statutory requirements of modern society is about to crash headfirst into the concrete wall of reality. He thought he was a sovereign king operating above the law, but the court will treat him like a run-of-the-mill deadbeat who tried to use a religious loophole to skip out on a 14-year tab. The mediator will systematically dissect his finances, slicing through the tangled web of his LLCs and television payouts, laying bare the grotesque discrepancy between his luxury vehicles, his expensive jewelry, his sprawling property investments with Robyn, and the financial scraps he tossed to Christine. Every excuse Kody has uttered on television, that he was too busy, that he was spread too thin, that Christine was keeping Truly away, will be eviscerated by the undeniable truth of his own bank statements. The psychological devastation of this moment cannot be overstated, as Kody's carefully constructed aggrieved father narrative is permanently, legally destroyed. For years, he relied on the television audience to at least partially buy into his victimhood, twisting the narrative to suggest that he was a loving, desperate father whose family was maliciously stolen from him by a cabal of bitter, independent women. He weaponized the language of parental alienation, crying for the cameras, and playing the role of the tragically abandoned patriarch. But the outcome of this lawsuit will staple a permanent, irrefutable label to his forehead that no amount of PR spin can ever wash away. When a judge legally orders him to pay retroactive support, it is a formal, state-sanctioned declaration that he failed in his duties as a father. It is the government officially stating that he did not provide, he did not protect, and he did not show up. He will be financially locked down, his assets frozen or heavily garnished, his wages intercepted, and his precious hoarded wealth drained to satisfy a debt to the child he used as a pawn for television ratings. The Coyote Pass property, the barren, undeveloped dirt lots that stand as a rotting monument to his massive ego and his broken promises, may very well be leveraged or sold off at auction to cover the devastating financial blow. The dream of the grand plural family compound will end not in a joyous reunion, but in a forced asset liquidation to pay off a child support judgment. And in the center of this impending financial and emotional apocalypse stands Robyn, the architect of her own gilded cage, finally realizing that she has chained herself to a sinking stone. The legal marriage certificate she fought so hard to secure, the document she believed would permanently elevate her above the other wives and grant her absolute security, is the exact legal instrument that makes her jointly liable for the catastrophic fallout of Kody's past. She cannot simply distance herself from this. She cannot cry and claim she didn't know. The courts will look at their shared assets, their joint accounts, and the lifestyle they built using the funds that should have been proportionately supporting all of Kody's minor children. Robyn, who has famously avoided contributing financially to the family pot while simultaneously draining its resources, will be forced to watch her carefully hoarded kingdom be dismantled piece by piece. The artwork, the expensive figurines, the luxury cars, all of it becomes potential collateral in a massive legal reckoning. The ultimate crushing irony is that the monogamous, legally protected life they destroyed the entire plural family to achieve is precisely what leaves them entirely exposed to the financial ruin raining down upon them. They isolated themselves on a mountain of stolen resources, and now the storm has arrived, and there is absolutely nowhere left to hide. Meanwhile, a beautiful, quiet victory is unfolding hundreds of miles away from the toxic, suffocating atmosphere of Flagstaff. Truly Brown, the child at the center of this legal hurricane, remains blissfully untouched by the chaos her biological father is experiencing. She is living in Utah, surrounded by a massive, fiercely protective extended family, thriving in a home filled with actual warmth, stability, and unconditional love. Christine's decision to leave Kody was not merely a flight from a bad marriage. It was a desperate, successful rescue mission. She pulled her daughter out of a family culture that actively prioritized the emotional needs of a narcissistic patriarch over the developmental needs of his children. Truly does not have to compete with Robyn's children for a scrap of attention. She does not have to endure the tension of a father who only visits when it suits his filming schedule or his ego. She has been entirely liberated from the emotional gravity of Kody Brown, free to grow, to laugh, and to exist without the heavy, oppressive burden of his conditional love. Christine has not only secured her daughter's emotional future, but she is now using the absolute power of the law to secure the financial compensation they were denied for over a decade. It is a masterstroke of justice, a flawless, perfectly executed checkmate against a man who never even realized he was playing the game. When the final gavel falls, it will echo with the absolute finality of a closing tomb. Kody Brown will be left entirely alone in his cluttered, paranoid mansion, stripped of his wealth, stripped of his reality television credibility, and stripped of the patriarchal title he believed was his divine right. He will be remembered not as the supreme leader of a sprawling, successful plural family, but as a cautionary tale of hubris, a man who lost everything because he was simply too arrogant, too neglectful, and too terrified to sign his own daughter's birth certificate. The trap he unknowingly set for himself 14 years ago has finally snapped shut, breaking the back of his financial empire and leaving him to rot in the ruins of his own massive ego. If you loved this deep dive into the absolute destruction of Kody Brown's empire, you have to hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video, leave a comment below telling me exactly what you think the judge should do to Kody's bank accounts, and make sure your notifications are turned on so you never miss an episode of Jenny Exposes. The truth is always darker than reality TV, and we are just getting started.